Well, I hear the noon whistle here in Fort Atkinson. So this is the my cue to welcome all of you out there. I am Steve Larson, a member of the editorial staff here at Hoard's Dairyman magazine. Glad to have you with us, and we're really looking forward today to the webinar on margin protection, what's right for you, and I guess it'd be what's right for you in the case of the producers that are listening, but also for the clientele of you advisors that are with us today. So we're looking forward to having John Newton at the University of Illinois make the presentation, and we also want to take this opportunity to thank Zenpro Performance Minerals for their sponsorship of the webinar today, and send our greetings to Mike Hutchins, our co-host down there at the University of Illinois, and Jim Baltz down there at University. Also, you got us outnumbered down there, three of you guys working together down there today. And so we welcome you and thank you for your help and participation. And Mike, you can go ahead and introduce our presenter.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. We're excited to have Dr. John Newton online. In fact, he's in our office here today, or right here our studio. So he's under our control, right direct. So we don't have to worry too much about lines here today. John is a native of Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville.
You gotta have the slur in it.
I'll get that. Louisville, Kentucky. Got all his degrees at The Ohio State University. Then he worked for about 10 years at the USDA Ag Marketing Services as an agriculture economist. And then we're very fortunate to have him join our staff here at the University of Illinois. He is a clinical assistant professor in the agriculture commodity markets in the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Economics at the University of Illinois. Wow, that's a big title there, John. Anyway, we're excited to have you here, and we're covering a topic that's near and dear to everybody's heart right now, and that's what are we going to do with the new dairy bill. So, John, we'll turn it over to you and have at it.
Mike, thanks so much for having me. I've heard so much about you. It's just great to finally be here and meet you in person. First of all, anybody online that wants to go and access the tool for dairy is available online at fsa.usda.gov/MPP tool, and then you can find educational material including PowerPoint slides, etc. at www.dairymarkets.org/MPP. I would also encourage all the listeners to submit questions during the presentation, and then we'll answer them at the end of the webinar. Here at Illinois, we also developed tools for ARC and PLC, and we're in development of tools for the specialty crop programs. The ARC and PLC tools for folks looking to make a decision among those two or between those two programs can find a decision tool. It's our Agricultural Policy Analysis System, APAS. You can find that at fsa.usapass.com. And there you can go in and look at sample farms or build your own custom farm to understand the important program decision between ARC and PLC. And then you can also access the dairy tool, which we're going to cover here today. Given that we're going to talk about dairy and risk management, I wanted to ask the audience a question.
Yes, we have our first polling question, and here's our chance to vote very early. Have you used risk management tools for your dairy farm? This gives John a bit of a break here, and you have 5 choices. So the polls are now open, Jim. Is that right? And so yes, futures and options, yes. I forward contract milk or feed, yes. Third choice, I use livestock gross margins for dairy, yes. All of the above, number 4. And the last one, no. I do not use any of these risk management tools. So we're now open and we're voting. And
I'm not sure what the most popular one is going to be, Mike, but I know the one for our farm is number 2, actually.
Number 2 is what Hoard's is going to do. We got 50% of the votes in. Come on, you Republicans, let's get online here. Let's not dilly-dally around. Let's go. Make a decision. Man, I tell you, in Illinois, we got some bad decisions this year for governor, but we'll leave it at that. We'll just leave it at that. We're up at...
we're at about 54%.
Man, come on, you guys. We're kind of stuck here. There's a couple popular ones here.
We need some upstate returns to come in here at the last moment.
Yeah, we're not good. We've already got a minute open. Now, let's go, guys. We got to get up to 60%. We're at 59. I think we're going to give you no more time. Let's close the polls. Jim, can you show that to everybody? And John, what do you think?
Looks like we've got 2. One is I forward contract milk or feed, or no, I don't use any risk management instrument at all. 61%, in fact, said They do not use risk management instruments.
Does that surprise you?
Actually, no, it doesn't surprise me because the prior dairy safety net was not a risk management style instrument. So dairy had a safety net called the Milk Income Loss Contract. And from 2009 to 2013, that program covered 185 billion pounds of milk and paid $1.6 billion to 47,000 dairy farmers. So prior to this new MPP program, the participation decision dairy farmers had to make was, I am in the MILC program. And when prices triggered, they received a countercyclical payment from the government. And we don't have that anymore. So now the emphasis is going to be on dairy farmers to start thinking about how they manage risk, getting some skin in the game. The problem with the MILC program that we had historically, though, was it only covered 2.985 million pounds of milk. And so if you look at benefit concentration in the program, it's highly skewed towards the upper Midwest and some in the Northeast. We're up, over 50% of the milk produced in those regions qualified and received an MILC benefit. 42% of the milk in the U.S. was covered, but if you look out west where we've grown, the leading dairy states in the last decade, 20 years, California had less than 13% of their milk covered by MILC, Texas less than 20%. So as a safety net program run by the government, it was no longer viewed to be an adequate to meet the economies of scale of the modern U.S. dairy industry. Add to the fact that MILC barely covered spikes in feed. So Congress indicated that something new was needed, and that something new is the MPP dairy program. It's a margin protection program. And how it works, it's voluntary. So dairymen across the country can choose not to participate if they don't want to. But if they participate, it protects them against downturns in a national average U.S. dairy margin. So it makes payments when the U.S. dairy margin falls below the farmer-selected coverage option. So they get to choose if they want to participate, and if they choose to participate, they get to choose what level. And there are price floors available from $4 to $8 per hundredweight in 50-cent increments. And then farmers can cover 25 to 90% of their historical maximum level of milk production. So for farms greater than 3 million pounds of milk per month, this represents a dramatic change in safety net protection in the U.S. Farms that choose to participate only have to pay a $100 administrative fee, and then the premium that they pay is based on the farmer-selected coverage level. So they choose how much to pay, how much coverage they want. Under MPP, payments are made up to 6 times a year. So we have a January-February period that's averaged. We have a March-April, all the way to November-December. So up to 6 times a year, a dairy farmer may be eligible to receive a payment if the U.S. index falls below the coverage level that they select. And finally, one of the most important features of this program is there are no longer eligibility constraints, income or production. So the 3 million pound cap found under MILC is no longer there. In addition, the AGI on non-farm income is no longer a part of the program. So all dairy farmers in the U.S. are eligible to participate and receive safety net protection. And the way it works, the way I've just described it to you, it functions a lot like an option, like a USDA-backed put option. And the components of that put option are pretty simple. One, we're looking at corn. So there's a feed ration. 50% of it is corn. A quarter of it's hay, and a quarter of it's soybean meal. Now, these are national average feed prices. So it doesn't reflect the price of feed on your farm. For example, out west, folks using a lot of canola, it doesn't reflect that. This is a national index represented by these 3 major commodities. And what it does, it constructs a farm bill income over feed cost ration. So we take those 3 feed ingredients, corn, soybean meal, and alfalfa hay, multiply them by a feed ration that's fixed in the farm bill, and we subtract that from the USDA announced all milk price. And that gives you a Farm Bill dairy production margin. And you can buy protection against declines in this national margin. So again, it's the national margin. It's not a margin on an individual farm. Well, let's look at this margin. What's important here? Well, it's important to recognize that USDA-backed coverage on this goes from $4 to $8 per hundredweight, that blue area. So if you choose to enroll and participate in the MPP dairy program, this blue area represents where USDA-backed coverage is available. And as you can see, it could completely eliminate some pretty significant downturns that we've experienced in dairy farm revenue over the last decade. 2009 could be smoothed out, 2012 could be smoothed out, as well as 2013. And that helps prevent catastrophic declines in farm equity. So that's the new dairy farm safety net. But we also mentioned that there's no longer an eligibility constraint. So the 3 million pound cap found under MILC is no longer there. It's a larger dairy farm safety net. So in the previous map, we showed MILC benefits were aggregated there in the upper Midwest and Northeast. But now, since dairy farmers can cover a maximum of their historical level of milk production over 11, 12, and 13, these larger dairy producing states, such as California, have an opportunity to protect a much larger portion of their milk supply. If you just do the simple math on how much milk we produced in 2013 multiplied by 90%, this program could potentially protect 182 billion pounds of milk. Whereas over the last 4 years under MILC, we only covered 185 billion pounds of milk. So the size of the safety net has grown significantly with MPP dairy. And it's a new way to think about a government safety net. Again, 61% of our listeners have never used risk management. But now the new government safety net is like risk management. They have to get skin in the game and think about what level of protection they want. And so if you look at this chart, we've got a forecasted margin, and we see that you have to make a participation decision by November 28th for 2014 and 2015. That's when sign-up's going to end. If you do not choose to participate, you cannot sign up again until July 1 of 2015, and that would be open your enrollment period for 2016 coverage. But if you make a participation by November 28th, your coverage effective date is January 1, 2015 through December 31st, 2015, that orange box. And what happens is the coverage levels you select by November 28th are effective and fixed for the entire calendar year. So you make two decisions. You choose how much milk to protect. So for the 11% who have used futures and options, think about this as a hedge ratio. And then you choose what margin level to protect from $4 to $8.50 increments. Think of this as a strike price. So you have two choices to make with MPP dairy. But there are a lot of possibilities because we have coverage from $4 to $8 per hundredweight, and then you can cover anywhere between 25 and 90% of your milk. So in theory, there are 126 possible combinations under MPP dairy. And so it's a key decision that dairy farmers need to make when thinking about where to participate. How much protection do I need to avoid a catastrophic loss on the farm? And one of the things to think about is how much it's going to cost. How much is it going to cost you to get MPP dairy coverage? We see the $4 catastrophic coverage is free, but anything above that, from $4.50 all the way to $8, carries a premium per hundredweight. Now, there are two premiums. The first 4 million pounds is at a lower rate, but anything above 4 million pounds of covered production history, you pay a higher premium. For example, from $6.50 to $7 coverage is 50 cents, but the Tier 2 premium rate increases by 54 cents. So understanding the cost of coverage under the wide array of coverage levels available is an important decision when deciding what level to participate under MPP dairy. Now, another key feature of this is these premiums are fixed. There's a 25% discount for the first 2 years, 2014 and 2015, but after that, these premium rates will never change for the life of the Farm Bill. that's unlike any other risk management tool we've ever had. The price of crop insurance changes based on the risk environment. So here the premium's fixed. It gives dairy farmers an opportunity to evaluate the risk environment and think about what level of protection they may need. And here's exactly what I mean. If you go back and just look at the last 6 years, five or 6 years, and you can look at the available price floors in the market, and I use the futures market and the Farm Bill ration to construct an equivalent MPP dairy margin. And what we see is that the market price floor always changes. The risk environment in milk and feed markets changes every single day. For example, in November 2010, if you were trying to lock in a margin for 2011, the best you could get using the Farm Bill formula was $4.58 per hundredweight. But if you see this blue box, MPP coverage is up to $8. So MPP coverage is constant. The premiums are constant, whereas markets change every single day. So you can use this information to try to think about how much it's going to cost you to participate and what the market environment for risk is to make a participation decision. And that's what we did here at the University of Illinois. So we have an MPP-funded education project. We partnered with Wisconsin, Michigan State, Penn State, Minnesota, Cornell, and of course my alma mater, The Ohio State University, to come up with a decision aid to help dairy farmers make this decision. And it's an easy program to use. So I think we only had 0% using LGM Dairy in the past, but had we had 1%, that person could, within one click of the mouse, go back and forth to compare MPP Dairy and the livestock gross margin insurance for dairy. And then we built it to be easy to use, farmers in mind. That was the key thing. USDA said, we want this to be easy. And all of the Illinois decision aids are easy to use. So we only need one data point, and that's your production history. So when you put in this case, the Hordes farm that we're going to use, about 11 million pounds of production history. That's the only piece of data we need. Once you put that piece of data in, within 4 clicks of the mouse, you can actually print your FSA enrollment form and walk it into the office. And what are these 4 steps? Well, the first one is understanding what your production history is. The second is evaluate an MPP dairy forecast. Third, you select a coverage level and a coverage percentage. And then fourth, you can print your enrollment forms. That's how easy it is to use. Just like our ARC PLC tool that we've developed, you can get in and get the information you need for participation in as few as 4 to 5 clicks of a mouse. The other thing that we did, because we realized that the dairy industry is moving, people are flexible, people are on the go. So this tool works with all the electronic devices. So if you're on an iPhone or an Android device or a tablet, a laptop computer or a desktop PC, this tool works exactly the same. And then all the calculations that we do to make an MPP margin forecast are done in the cloud, so that your computer is updated automatically if you change any information. So it works that fast. We're currently working on building an advanced feature that lets users go in and think about some alternative price scenarios. Now, we're not complete with that yet, but once we do, that'll be available on the decision tool, and you'll be able to find it at the website that we're going to show here in just a moment. Another important thing is data security. So your farm data is your information. It's not mine. It's not Mike's. It's not Hort's. It's not property of the University of Illinois. We do not collect the data. You put in that one data point, you run all the scenarios you want, and when you close out of your browser or close the window on your iPhone or Android, that data is gone forever. We do not monitor it. And then it's always available. So we update the tool. The tool is updated with new prices every single day based on what the market did the prior day, and then it's free to use. You don't have to create a user ID or a password. You can just log in, evaluate these margins, and think about MPP Dairy. And even if you don't participate, you can log in and evaluate the direction of the margins. And that's something you can't get anywhere else. Where can you go and get a real quick forecast in seconds? And that's what we do. That's what this decision tool has. Finally, we have a whole suite of educational materials available online. You can get videos. We just put up 9 different videos talking about the administrative features of MPP dairy, farm ownership, transfer of base. We also have PowerPoint material where you can think about things like basis and LGM dairy. There's printed material such as a brochure or a pamphlet. And then we also have links to other farm bill decision tools online. So National Milk Producers Federation put out a really great tool, and you can find that link on this website as well. Given all that information, I think it's time for another poll question. What do you think?
Okay. Are we on? Okay, we have another poll question. Are you familiar with one, or have you used the USDA FSA MAP MPP Dairy Decision Tool? So here we go. You got 4 choices. First choice is 1, very familiar. 2, somewhat familiar. 3, not familiar. 4, very unfamiliar. So the polls are open. This is, I think, an easier one. Steve?
Yeah, well, no, I'll have to answer from my own case. I would say number 2, somewhat familiar. I've been to the website a couple of times. I've heard one webinar before this and one talk in person with Mike Stevenson up at the University of Wisconsin. So that would be my situation. Okay. But it'll be interesting to see what those of you out there are saying. And fast voting on this one. Mm-hmm. 75% already.
All right, let's close her up, Jim. We've got our majority. And John, what do you think of the results?
Mike, my feelings are kind of hurt. It's not familiar and very unfamiliar. I may have to come out to some people's houses to kind of walk them through this thing. But better yet, I've got a webinar and I've got internet, so let's just do it right here. Let's familiarize yourself with this new decision tool. All right, so here we are. This is the MPP decision tool that we developed for the USDA here at the Illinois. And when you load the screen, the first thing it tells you is when sign up is. So sign up this year's open September 2 to November 28th. Now, what is November 28th? Mike, you know what November 28th is?
I think something with turkeys.
I think it has more to do with high-definition TVs and PlayStations. That's Black Friday. And so just today in the Horde's Dairyman exclusive, they said maybe USDA is going to think about extending that. So if you get the Horde's Dairyman email every morning or every week, you'll see that USDA is potentially considering extending the sign-up deadline. But as of right now, it's just November 28th. And during the first sign-up period, you can register for 2014 retroactive coverage and 2015. So that kind of information is presented on the decision tool. It also says, unfortunately, that sometimes Uncle Sam runs out of money. And if Uncle Sam runs out of money, your payments are possibly subject to sequestration. That's an important disclaimer. What we then do is we list what's new. So anything we add to the decision tool is listed in this section. So once we add the advanced price features, it will be listed here. And then finally, an important disclaimer. It says that myself, Mike, Jim running the webinar, none of us at the University of Illinois or the USDA are responsible for your decision. This is a risk disclosure. Mike seems like he wants to take some responsibility. After reading the disclaimers, you can agree and proceed into the tool. And the first thing you're given is a margin forecast. So this is updated every single day. So what we see here, updated 10/10/2014. So on Friday's close of futures and feed prices for milk and feed, this is what the market indicated MPP margins may look like for the coming coverage period. And it's a forecast graph. So the black line represents an average, the average of the market's expectation of where this margin could be going. And then the shaded regions represent what's called a confidence interval. Now, it's just a 50% interval. So if we were to graph the entire confidence band, you'd probably see probabilities deep into this blue area. And that means there's risk coming in the market. That's what this tells me looking at it right now. I do not get a false sense of security looking at this margin. This says we may have export markets drying up next year. we may have milk prices falling. And so if that's the case, I need to think about how I'm going to protect my dairy. And so you can go and you can look at a probability table, and this gives you probabilities that the margin is going to fall below those particular coverage levels during any 2-month period. And the last webinar I did about a month ago maybe, this November, December was only 16%. And what's happened in the last month is that there's been more pressure on milk prices in a downward direction for those deferred months. So that means the probability that MPP is going to make payments next year has increased. And that's something that users can see every single day if they come into the decision tool. That's one of the really neat features. I check it every morning almost before I read the newspaper. My wife doesn't like the bright iPad screen in the morning. But nevertheless, let's continue. So you can see a forecast. You can put in your operation name. Now, what Mike didn't tell you is that I went to the University of Louisville, and I'm a big basketball fan. So we're going to go Rick Pitino Dairy. Is that okay, Mike?
Nope.
If I spell Pitino right, we'll just leave it that. Oh, there we go. I think I did. All right. And then we're going to put in an actual production history. Here we're going to use just a representative size, maybe 11 million pounds. That's the size of the Hordes operation. That's a little bit too big. All right. Now, if you're a farmer logging in for the very first time and you don't know what your production history is, maybe your cooperative hasn't sent you that piece of information, you can click this question mark. And it'll provide you a spreadsheet where you can go in and list your monthly milk production and then upload it right back into the decision tool. We're not going to do that here today. So then we're already at step 1 and step 2. We've evaluated margins. Step 3 is to select a coverage level. So I come over here. I can move my coverage percentage anywhere between 25 and 90%. So let's say we're going to do 50%. We're going to cover half the milk. The other half, maybe I use a forward contract or something. I've already locked in some of my milk for 15, so I don't need to cover it all. I'm going to cover some. This tells me how much it's going to cost. So if I wanted the $4 coverage, it's going to cost me $100. Now, what do I expect to receive? This is based on probabilities, updated every day based on market prices. And this says, well, the market still thinks the margins are going to be favorable. I mean, let's go back and look real quick. The market's still showing expected margins that are above MPP trigger levels. Now, that's just the market expectation. The market doesn't show you a catastrophe before it happens. A catastrophe just happens. So, nevertheless, you think about what are the expected payments? What is the likelihood, based on today's prices, that MPP could trigger payments in 2015? I'm a little bit more bearish than the market, so I'm going to go $650. That's what I think. It's going to cost me $7,300. I don't expect to have a positive net return, but I understand that I put a safety net floor under my dairy based on this national index. So once I've selected a coverage level, I can download my FSA form. This says you have selected to cover 50% of your production history at a 650 margin level for 2015. If this information is not correct, go back. I feel good about that. So let's download my FSA form. And it has happened, and it's downloaded. Here it is. So the FSA, it says this form was generated using the MPP decision tool on October 13th, Columbus Day, 2014. The important thing is it says by November 28th, you've got to take this form into your FSA office. Otherwise, you're not enrolled. So this form just gives you a head start on everybody else that's going to line up on Black Friday. We continue to move down the screen here. We see Rick Pitino National Championship Dairy Farm. That's my farm name. And then you go down, and it has the coverage options that we've selected. $650 at 50%. And then it tells me my calculated premium amount, $7,209 and I have a $100 administrative fee. So it says premium minimum due. Minimum due by February 1. That means once I sign up, I have to pay the $100 at sign up, and then I go into my FSA office. I have to pay $1,800 by the 1st of February, and then the other $5,400 by June 1 in order to get coverage. So that's the FSA form, and that can be generated if you're using a smartphone, tablet, PC, whatever. This form can be generated. And if you're on a smartphone, you can generate the form and email it to yourself and find a printer. I'm often on the road and have to do similar things. Let's go back to the tool. So that's pretty easy. It's a pretty easy tool to use. That's the way we designed it, is to be easy. But understanding risk and risk management is not easy. So to understand how this program may have worked had it been in play in previous years, you can load it. You can go back in time and look and do a kind of what-if analysis. So let's go back to 2009. Let's change the coverage percent to 90%, and let's look at the margin. Now, on September 30th, 2008, that would have been the last day you could make decisions for 2009 coverage had this program been in place. Now, let's think about 2008, September 30th. What was the market like then? Well, we had fairly strong milk prices, and we had some very high feed prices. $7 corn was common. All months traded on the board for 2009. And so what did that tell you? It said that you're entering in a risky environment. And you can see the forecasted margin in 2009 was below the MPP coverage levels. That gives you an idea about anticipated risk in the markets. We can include actual margins just by clicking this box. And what do you see? We see that in January 2009, we had a world recession. Export opportunities dried up, feed prices collapsed, and so did dairy margins because the milk price went from $15 to $18 down to $9. And so given this information, you understand that MPP could work as a risk management tool. But more importantly, let's think about how it would have helped you smooth financial losses. So you can go back and look at select coverage. Now, this is based on the expected returns of the program, based on probabilities and market prices. We see that for 11 million pound production history covered at 90%, the premium for 650 coverage would have been $20,810, about less than 30 cents a hundredweight. $4 coverage, again, is $100. So if you elected to just do catastrophic coverage, based on probabilities, you would have expected $3,200 in MPP payments for a net return of $3,200, give or take. But had you been more averse to risk and thought about this and said, you know what, for 30 cents or maybe even a dime, I think 550 coverage is 5 cents or something, I'm going to protect myself in the event of a catastrophic decline in margins. You can see that the expected returns, again, based on probabilities, are higher. And so you can think about, well, what would you have done? Now, Jim, can I get Steve back on? He's a hordes guy. Can I ask him, what would you have done, Steve?
Well, hindsight's always great. You would have taken a pretty good position.
Well, this is
at that time.
This is no hindsight. We're talking about based on this market forecast. The market says, "Hey, Steve, it's going to be a risky environment in 2009." Do you trust the market, or do you say, "Nah, I don't believe in the market, even though that's the best thing we've got"? What would you do?
Well, I probably would have gone at least $6.
Okay, so Steve's saying $6. That's a modest premium cost, probably less than a dime, and that's a smart decision. Because what we're saying is, if we go back and look at this forecasted margin, look at the probability tables. All right, 650. We're almost at 50% likely that this margin is going to trigger at that 650. 70% that it's going to trigger under 8. That's important information, because if somebody tells you there's a 70% chance of rain tomorrow, are you going to go outside without an umbrella? I don't think you are. So let's go back and think about that. So he said $6 coverage. Now, what we can do is we can include actual net revenue. We can load that blue line and say, how would this program have actually paid? So just by clicking include actual net revenue, we see that $6 coverage would have cost $11,000, but the market got much worse than it had anticipated. And your actual return from the program would have been $164,000. Now, that's not a return on your investment. 2009 was a terrible year. What that is, that's a return of your investment. And what you can do there is you can take that and maybe you can pay your feed bill on time. You can pay your employees, but you don't have to worry about a catastrophic decline in margins forcing you out of business. And that's what you can think about when you think about risk management and how this program is designed to work. So you can go back, you can load other years. So 2009, I mean, everybody with hindsight knows what was going on there. But let's think about 2012. All right, 2012, that graph looks the same. And the reason why it looks the same is we had the renewable fuel standard pushing feed prices pretty high. We had some just moderately priced milk prices. But again, if you look at the probability table, it says there's 70% chance these margins could be below the $8 level. Now, let's go back. Steve, you still here? Steve, is he there still?
He's muted, I think.
I'm back.
Okay, he's back. All right. So now, Steve, let's think about this. You went through 2009, and let's say you didn't have protection, and now you're looking at the same scenario for 2012. What are you going to do? You get the option to make this decision again because under MPP you can change every single year. So it's kind of like health insurance. Once you sign up, you've got health insurance, and then every year there's open enrollment to change what level of coverage you want for the year. So now, what do you think you're going to do now?
I think I might be inclined to even go higher based on the previous experience and the way the graph looks at that point.
All right.
Let's say 650.
650. So again, just a modest increase in the premium cost. You know, look at this. From 11 to 650, it almost doubles. But from 650 to 7, hello, that's a tripling almost of how much it costs to get coverage. $8 coverage is nearly 5 times as expensive. But let's say 650. Again, just like 2009, we can include actual net revenue. And I caution everybody, this is a big what if. Had we had this program in place, prices likely would have been very different. But just for demonstration purposes, let's include it. And there you go. It says, had you had 650 coverage, your net return would have been $120,000. Again, that's money to pay your feed bill. That's money to pay your employees. It's a return of your investment. That's the way to think about MPP and the way to think about risk management. And then another example I like to do is 2013. And I like to do that one because, look, the market thought prices were going to get better. In September 2012, we were coming out of the drought. We knew we had a low carry on corn. We knew feed prices were high. There were dairymen locking in $8 corn across the country, and yet you can make an MPP coverage decision. So this is equivalent to almost being able to buy fire insurance when you smell smoke in the attic because you know the condition of the prior year's crop. Now, you don't know what's going to happen in the upcoming growing season. There's risk in 2013 that we have a back-to-back drought. And I remember people saying, what if we have a back-to-back drought? Nevertheless, you can make a coverage decision here. And we can go and we can look at probability table. And we can say, okay, given the current low carry of feed, I just had a drought. Now look at this. There's a 77% probability that these months are going to be below $8 for the simple fact that people are paying astronomical prices for feed to start 2013. So you can do the same thing. You can select a coverage level. The difference is the market can never anticipate what's really going to happen. And so 2013, we started the year with really high feed prices. But what happened after planting? We had really good weather conditions and a really good crop. And so that drove down cash feed prices later in the year. And you can see that. You can see we include actual margins. It's pretty bad to start the year. But then by the end of the year, by harvest time, the margin improves. And that's because we had a great crop and we had lower feed prices. So let's go back to select coverage. In this case, because the feed prices dropped, you don't see these lower coverage levels kicking in at these catastrophic coverage. So had you just been in at $5 or $5.50, you wouldn't have received a positive return from MPP Dairy. But what you would have had is a healthier margin. You would have got protection during times of the year when you needed $43,000. But towards the end of the year, when you didn't need it, you would have paid in some premiums. But that's the concept of risk management. And so farmers using or thinking about using MPP Dairy can go in and they can use this tool to make a more informed risk management decision. And I say, you look at 2015, and that looks pretty good. But you look at 2008, and boy, that looks pretty similar. So I wouldn't get too confident that these margins are going to stay at the levels that they are. And if we get a catastrophic decline, if we see milk prices fall by 40% or so, then MPP is going to become an option to think about risk management. Now, we've got cheap feed right now, but if after planting next year, if we have adverse weather, if we have a drought or a flood, then cash prices for feed at the end of 2015 could go up. Now, we've got prices going up to try to buy some acres, but if those prices go up due to some weather conditions combined with the loss of export opportunities on the milk side, 2015 may not be so rosy. So don't get too confident. But the good thing is this tool will update every single day. So you can watch the markets. If futures go up or down, or feed goes up and down, when you come back tomorrow, this tool will have new prices in it. It's as real time as we can get. And it's a great forecast, even if you're not using MPP and you just want to know what's the direction of the industry looking like. This can give you some insight there. All right, we've got to get moving here. So we've concluded the demonstration. I got another poll question.
Well, here we go. We're on. Let's vote. We got 30 seconds to vote. How likely are you to participate in the MPP dairy program? 5 choices. Very likely, somewhat likely, undecided, not likely, very unlikely. Let's vote. Let's open. And we're off and running here. And holy smokers, Steve.
I'm pretty sure very likely in the case of the Hordes Dairyman farm. I'll put it that way.
Very likely is what Hordes is looking at. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I tell you, we are going to be at 60% vote. Jim, let's close the poll. And John, what do you think of the vote?
I think we've got a lot of smart listeners because it is risk management and it can help you. Now, those of you that are not likely, very unlikely, I want to skip ahead some slides. I had prepared some slides talking about basis, but let's go back. Let's think about something key, and that is uncertainty about uncertainty. Now, I've got an article in next month's Hordes Dairyman with a colleague, Dr. Maren Bozich from Minnesota. And what we talk about is the uncertainty that we build into the tool is based on the market's expectations of risk. But what if those guys up in Chicago don't know? Do they really know how risky milk markets are going to be? And maybe they don't. And so what if something happens? So I've got on here the graph of margins through 2015 based on last week's market. But see that blue line? What if milk prices collapse? What if they drop $4 or $5? Then we're in that MPP trigger area. And that's what farmers who answered unlikely, not likely, need to think about. And maybe what they think about is they say, okay, my farm's financial health is in pretty good condition. I've got enough of a war chest to weather any type of storm that comes my way. But what I would say is think about this in the context of all the risk management tools that you have available. So you can use futures and forwards like Steve mentioned. You can use MPP Dairy, and you can diversify your protection and make an informed risk management decision. But I just caution that markets are inherently risky. MPP dairy can be an opportunity to smooth your financial losses and make a return of your investment. But the implication of these fixed premiums is that the premium is always going to be too high or too low. And when it's too high, as it is today, because the market is saying that there's a low probability of this thing ever triggering for 2015, these premiums are a little bit too high. And what that does, that creates an opportunity to buy cheaper coverage on the board. So you could use futures or forwards to lock in high prices and combine that with your MPP CAT coverage of $100. And what you've done there is you're protecting yourself against some kind of decline, and you're locking in these margins that we see today so that you know that you're farming tomorrow and the next day and the next year, and you're not going to get wiped out by something unexpected. So these innovations are happening today. So this is from a bulletin I got from some friends in Chicago, and they say for a particular dairy that they had, they can construct $8 coverage for 35 cents. Now that's a lot cheaper than the USDA premium, but that's because futures markets are in a lot better shape. But if you look, I ran the model, and Jim's not appreciative of me adding this slide at the very last minute, but the expected payment for each of these coverage levels right now, based on Friday's futures, is still very low. $8 coverage is only expected to pay about 8 cents a hundredweight over the year for 2015, and that's based on futures markets. As these markets get riskier and riskier and prices decline, this expected indemnification is going to go up. And the important thing for you to consider is, are you in and do you have protection, or are you on the outside with nothing at all? And I would encourage everybody, since we don't have MILC anymore, to think about managing risk so that you're protected in the event of something catastrophic happening. And I knew I was out of time, so let's move it on over to Dr. Hutchins.
Okay, Steve.
Yes, well, thank you very much, John. Very, very well done, very informative. I'm sure that if we asked the question about familiarity with the program again, we'd see a change. Nice job, John, very much. And this is a time for us to thank also the sponsors of today's webinar, Zenpro Performance Minerals, and again, our co-hosts down at the University of Illinois, Mike Hutchins and Jim Baltz, as well. Just a note or a reminder that those of you who have participated today will receive a very brief survey later this week. We appreciate your response to that survey, as it will help us guide our webinar choices in the future and how we serve you that way. Also, if you respond to that webinar, you get earlier access to the archive views of this webinar, and this webinar will be posted on our archives later this week, at the end of the week, or by the end of the week, I should say, and will be available for more viewing at that time. Also, we want to look ahead to our next webinar toward longer-lasting cows. Frank Gehry from Colorado State University, a colorful veterinarian there, always an interesting presenter. And looking ahead to December, milk quality and mastitis during the winter months, Leo Timms at Iowa State University. We're looking forward to his insight on that too. That one is going to be brought by Kuhn North America. With those comments, Mike, are there some questions for John?
Yes, there are, and here we go on the speed round. You went very good. First question came in very early. I plan to selling my herd to my son next year. How does the program adapt for the new owners?
You know, that's a really good question, and that's one that I've gotten all across the country. I was just in Texas yesterday. I'm going to Vermont tomorrow, and everybody has a unique scenario. Every farm is different, and what FSA is going to do is you can go into the office, and they're going to evaluate this thing on a case-by-case basis. The one thing they're not trying to do is prevent somebody from being able to get risk protection from the government. So I would encourage you, in anybody that's in a unique scenario, to visit with your FSA office to make sure that you get everything straightened out for your MPP.
Enter question, if the government runs out of money, do I get my premium back I paid?
Well, let's rewind that. So what sequestration did for MILC is it reduced your payments. You still got some payments, but just not your full payment. And then once the government came out of sequestration, they actually reimbursed you. They made you full. They made you whole. So, I can't predict what they'll do if we enter sequestration again with this. But I imagine that if you pay a premium and they have to sequestration a portion of your payment, that they'll make you whole at some point in the future. But I'll also add that if you pay a premium and markets are great and this program doesn't trigger, you do not get your premiums back. Just like crop insurance, if you buy crop insurance coverage and don't need it, well, you just paid for insurance is what you've done.
Okay, another question. In your first example, you covered 50% of your production history. You could do this and forward contract the maximum amount of your milk. They're not related. The fact that you forward contracted has no bearing on how much covering you select. You want to comment on that?
No. That the user is exactly right. What that's called it's called a Texas hedge, and that's when you hedge more than 100% of your cash position. So here they forward contracted all their milk, and then they say, okay, there's an opportunity with this MPP, a 70% probability that it's going to make payments. I'm going to get some of that too. Well, they could also buy futures markets. They could become a speculator and sell corn. Buy oil. I mean, of course, you can do all of that. But for a lot of dairy farmers I talk to, they say, you know what? I've got a little bit locked in. I'm selling to my cheese plant. I'm going to lock in some of this MPP. I want to leave my upside open, but I want to protect my downside. So you can use it all sorts of ways, and I'm very sure that some people will revert to a Texas hedge philosophy with this.
Another question. Why is the lock-in time frame for MPP 1 year instead of a smaller time frame, for example, every 3 months or 6 months?
Well, that's a great question. So essentially what you would have under that scenario is every 3 or 6 months you'd have to go in and make an MPP decision. Now that's a lot of work for dairy farmers. That's a lot of work for producers. That's a lot of work for FSA. I don't know why they didn't do that, but I know if you go back to the beginning of the Farm Bill debate, it was actually the opposite. The lock-in was for 5 years. So you would pick a coverage level and you were locked in for the entire Farm Bill. So originally, if you picked $4, that's all you could get for the whole Farm Bill. Or if you picked $8, you were locked in to $8 for the length of the Farm Bill. And the flexibility they added was an annual decision. Now, if you feel more comfortable with a shorter-term insurance contract, there's certainly LGM Dairy as an option. You can do 2 months all the way up to 10 months under that program. So, there's flexibility out there. You don't have to do MPP. You can do LGM, or you could do MPP with lower coverage levels and add on top of that some futures or forwards for these 2 or 3 month periods that the user was suggesting. The other thing is in the future, you could have this where you make more frequent decisions, but the risk environment always changes. So if you were to have a 2 or 3 month decision point every time, maybe the USDA would think about, okay, well, I need to change these premiums every 2 or 3 months. So it's really complicated. The more flexibility you have, the more that fixed premium structure becomes a concern.
Another question is Penn State and Wisconsin puts income over feed cost in many of their websites, and that's the milk cow feed costs. What are these feed costs encompass here in this program?
So let's go back a couple slides, or go forward in my case here. So this is a national index, so it doesn't represent the mailbox milk price that any one farmer has on their operation. It doesn't represent the price of milk that the Hordes farm represents. It represents the national margin, and that's going to be different every single place. So if you're in California and you've got milk prices that are $2 lower and your alfalfa hay prices cost more than a university professor's salary, then your margin's a lot lower. Okay? On the other hand, if you're a Jersey guy who happens to have a neighbor where I buy all my feed, I lock that in, and then I just so happen to have a great deal with Chipotle and I have really high milk prices, my margin's a lot different too. And so there's basis with everything. And the thing to understand with basis is it just moves the price floor that you're actually protecting up or down accordingly. Everybody that participates in MPP that's the same size and buys the same coverage level will get the exact same payment. So in this example, we've got the U.S. margin, that's that national index, and then beside it I've got California margins using the Farm Bill formula. So not using their actual feed ration. Out west, a lot of folks don't use soybean meal. Nevertheless, that's the component we're using here. But as you can see, the average margin for, this is 2012, in this California example was $2.54. And in fact, in May, it was real close to zero. And in both scenarios, for this, it's a 4 million pound operation in this example, MPP provides $2.20 per hundredweight. And what that does is it smooths your margin. If you don't need it, it can still help your equity position. And if you do need it, it can help. So, basis, what it does is it moves the price floor up or down. And I wrote an article on Farm Doc Daily just a couple weeks ago talking about that issue. Because what happens is basis here, it's not fixed. It's highly volatile. So if you think that your basis is on average $2, or in the Horde's case, maybe $4 to $6, that's not a fixed number. And if you take and add that number into your MPP coverage level when making a decision, you're not capturing the variability month to month in your basis. And what that means is you could be getting more or less protection than you actually think you're getting. So basis, some people, myself included, seem to think, what, it really doesn't matter. You have your own farm margin. This thing pays on an index. Just like the PLC program on corn, the reference price for that is $3.70. It doesn't matter that we've got a $1.85 to $2 basis in the upper Midwest because they're too busy moving sand and oil. So farmers up there, they'll get a payment if that national corn price falls below $3.70. End of story. Now you can try to make it more complicated and include this into a more strategic risk portfolio strategy. But I would caution folks to remember that basis is itself very variable, and more volatility in the basis changes your position, just like it does with an option contract. And so in this example, we've got a Wisconsin farm. They have higher milk prices, lower feed prices. Their average margin without MPP was $6.94. It was above the national average, but they still get to $2.20, and it still smooths out the margin. So, MPP, it's designed to work for everybody. The problem is we've got a national dairy industry with everybody doing something different. And in a safety net program, you have to have something that one size fits all.
Okay, one other comment, and that is when we look at feed costs, our listeners are listening, that includes the dry cow and the heifer costs along with the milk cow. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this represents dry cow, hospital cows, heifers, all the cows on the farm, and then what it represents is the cost to produce 100 pounds of milk. And so the ration started with National Milk Producers Federation coming up with the rations on these particular feed ingredients, and they did that by consulting animal scientists on what it's going to take to feed 100 or to produce 100 pounds of milk. And then after that ration, it was obviously tweaked a little bit by Congress.
Okay. Do you wish to comment on the last issue in Horde's Dairyman? And Mary Letterman said 39% drop in powdered milk price. That doesn't reflect anything in your in the lines here yet. You want to comment on that?
Sure. I know Mary very well, and she's exactly right. It doesn't reflect what's happening in international markets, but at the same time, neither does anything in Chicago right now. And as soon as Chicago picks it up, we'll pick it up. I don't impose any of my own assumptions on this. I take what comes from Chicago, and then we model it and put it right there for the users to look. So until Chicago picks it up, we're not going to show it because then we get into a position of being speculators, and we're not speculators. We just take the market information as given to construct a decision tool. And the next issue of Hordes that we have on your milk check is exactly that. What if, as Mary says, the market's wrong? And Mary's got a really good point. What if it's wrong? And if it's wrong, that's what you need to consider. But we don't want to get into the business of second-guessing the market and being financial advisors. I'm not a financial planner. I don't have the licenses. I can't do that sort of thing.
Up at World Dairy Expo, a producer said, I'm going to use just $4 million. Regardless if Hordes has got $11 million, I'm just going to use the $4 million base because it's cheaper for me to do that. Is he right?
The first $4 million covered is at the lower premium rate. So Hordes could change their coverage percentage to try to get close to that $4 million so that they have the lower premium rate. But the lowest you can go is 25%. So I was in Texas. There were some guys with 200 million pounds of milk a year. 25% of 200 million pounds.
Yeah, it's over.
It's quite a bit. So you can't necessarily just get 4. Sometimes you're unfortunately grouped into that other tier, whether you want to be or not.
Steve, any comments from your end down there?
No, I think we're right at the end of the hour. John, you've done an excellent job with the questions. It was a very nicely done webinar. We thank you much for it. And we also thank Zinpro for their sponsorship today. Reminder that surveys will be coming to those of you who were with us today. We appreciate your response to those and invite you to be with us as our next webinar, November 10th, Frank Gehry from Colorado State on longer lasting cows. In December 8th, winter milk quality and mastitis issues with Leo Timms from Iowa State University. Kuhn North America is the sponsor that time. Thanks to all of you for being with us. And again, thanks to Mike Hutchins, co-host down there at the University of Illinois, and Jim Baltz as well. And we hope to have you back with us again. That's all from Fort Atkinson for today.